What's up, everyone? Kevin here, and I am back with another single game daily fantasy football breakdown for DFS Army VIP members. And today we're looking at the single game showdown with the Packers going up against the Seattle Seahawks at Seattle for all the monies. Alright, so the basics of this game, and let's get started. And this is a little bit fun video because I decided to combine the breakdown with another Domination Station optimizer tutorial for single game formats. Specifically, I'm going to be looking at the FanDuel format. So there's a lot to cover here, and this is going to be a fun one. I had a little extra time, so I figured, for people who are still having a hard time trying to figure out how to use the optimizer tool, I would include that and do a little screencast and also show you a little bit of my research process so that you guys, the idea with DFS Army, we're trying to teach you, we have the tools in front of you to do the research. Now, I'm doing a lot of the research, I'm sharing my research with you, but I'm using DFS Army tools, and you guys have that at your fingertips. So part of what I'm going to do here is go over the tools, show you how I do my process of looking through these games, how we come up with our conclusions. It's going to be a fun ride. So let's get started. And first things first, I like to look at the defensive, capabilities of both of these teams, and starts with the quarterback position. If you take a look here, you will note that, here we go. Both of these teams have been pretty good at limiting opposing quarterback production, with the Packers ranking 7th overall, allowing 16.9 fantasy points per game. That is not a lot to opposing quarterbacks, and Seattle even a little bit better, ranking 3rd overall at 15.5. Now, part of the reason for that is a run-heavy approach by Seattle, just slowing down games and not allowing opposing teams to do a whole lot against them, but part of that is just, hey, they've been good against the pass. And we'll take a look at their cornerback play and see if we can determine why that is. According to DVOA, Seattle's pass defense is 6th overall, so just very good. Whereas their run defense, not as good, 20th overall. So technically, you would expect to attack the Seahawks via the run. Now, they faced the Rams and just the other week, and Gurley going bananas on them, and a few really high-end running games. But nonetheless, they're not great against the run at all, and they're giving up a ton of yards. On the Packers side, pass defense 9th overall, so very good. Run defense 26th overall. DVOA very bad, very bad. And that'll show itself here. If you take a look, let's see what the points per game allowed here to each of the positions. So even though the DVOA is a little worse than this, you'll see the Seahawks ranked 12th overall in fantasy points per game against the running back position. And the Packers are 16th, giving up 21.2. So both of these defenses seem to be more attackable via the run than the pass. That's important to note. This is the DFS Army research station for single game formats, in case you're not aware. Take a look at the wide receiver matchups, and you'll see that Devontae Adams, Lockett, and Baldwin all stand out. Randall Cobb is showing in the research station. He has been ruled out of this game, and St. Brown is going to be, when Cobb is out, what they do is move Scantling into the slot and St. Brown into to the outside. So your 3 wide receivers for the Packers are Adams in the best spot overall, followed by Scantling and St. Brown. And you'll note that while the Seahawks are really good against quarterbacks, they haven't been great against opposing wide receivers, and there's a little bit of a dichotomy there. But they are allowing 32 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. That's 21st overall ranking. Green Bay even worse, ranking 34th overall. Okay, so getting some of the basics getting some of the basics down. It's important to note that Seattle has been very good against opposing tight ends, ranking 6th overall, and the only team better, the Packers, 2nd overall. So neither of these teams are giving up many targets or receptions to opposing tight ends. 3.6 receptions per game. So we're going to temper our expectations there. See if there's any other important matchups to look at. Not here. So let's take a look at the Domination station. This is where we're going to get a sense of the projections, the player projections for each player. So the first thing we're going to do is start with the flex and just take a look at where players are projected. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers the highest projection, but Russell Wilson right there with him. Devontae Adams looks good here. Aaron Jones. Jones is your sneaky play, I would call him. Now, check out some of these salaries. It's really interesting. FanDuel jacked up the salaries of the 3 Seattle running backs to crazy levels. I would call Rashad Penny's 11.5 number just beyond crazy. All right? It's just crazy. All 3 guys are expected to be healthy for this slate. What does that mean? It's a clusterfuck. Okay? They're going to split carries. The way Seattle, I talk about this every week, the way Seattle uses, even last week when everybody was on Mike Davis, I said, look out for, if you check my sheet, it says look out for Rashad Penny. Because just when you think they're going to do one thing, they do another. And Penny actually went off last week. So for everybody who followed that, good job. There's no way of knowing when all 3 of these guys are active who's going to get the looks. Penny had the breakout week. Carson, he's been the top guy. Davis has been the passing down guy. No clue. I don't like any of them. I don't want to be overexposed to any one of these 3 turds. And yes, I'm calling them turds. I don't think they're actually turd players. These guys might be good, but the way an RBBC triple-headed monster is not my cup of tea. Now, another interesting thing. Look at Tyler Lockett's salary on FanDuel. $12K. He hasn't been a special wide receiver at all. 5 through, look at these target numbers. 6, 4, 2, 4, 4, 6. Okay. Why is he higher than Baldwin? 5, 4, 3, 8. Not that different. A little bit different result. Hasn't been getting in the end zone. Speaking of that, where's Moore on this list? Not J-Mon. David Moore. Not looking so great the last few weeks, but had some big games earlier this season. So any one of these 3 Seattle wide receivers are in play, but they're all low volume. The least interesting for me is Lockett, just because what the hell's up with $12K? I don't want to pay that. So he becomes a dart throw, not a core piece, even though he's priced like a core piece. These 3 running backs, all dart throws. Carson, the most likely to have a good game, but that salary and splitting touches with these other 2, hell no. Penny, it's just a no from me. I'm not paying that. I'm going to have very low exposure there. Mike Davis, also not super excited about a 3-way committee, but at least he gets passes and at least he's cheap. Kickers always in play in this type of environment, so Mason Crosby and we'll find Seabass. Both of these guys are fine. Even Jerron Brown gets some looks in this offense, which is crazy, and catches touchdowns. A super punt. Seattle spreads the ball around. Look, Randall Cobb out. Vanette, playable. 2 targets, caught a touchdown. 8 targets the week before. Let's see what Green Bay defense is versus tight ends, and we already talked about it. Not a great situation for either of these 2. Dixon and Vanette are both in play, I guess. But when you're going up against a team that's limited opposing tight ends, it's not ideal. Now, tight end rating and ranking against are very, very sketchy, so don't fully buy into it. because sometimes teams just haven't faced quality tight end play. So to finish up our initial matchup analysis, let's take a look at the wide receiver cornerback matchups to see if there's anything that stands out. Looks here like Adams is going to be spending most of his day against Trey Flowers. Not a good corner at all. Not a good corner. The only one worse than Flowers is Shaq Griffin. So these ratings, you want the negative. The positive number is a good coverage. Negative is bad. These are our cornerback ratings. And right here you see quarterback rating on throws towards that particular corner. So I'm looking at Adams going up against Trey Flowers, QBR of 118. That's crazy. 20% target rate. So no one is going away from Trey Flowers. Adams is in a smash spot here. Valdez-Scantling will be in the slot. I'm not scared of Justin Coleman. I'm scared, but probably the best rated corner. Not a scary rating, but the best rated corner on the team. And clearly he's allowing a much lower passer rating to quarterbacks that throw his way. But teams continue to target slot corners and Coleman at a 25% rate. So nothing to be scared of here. And finally, we're going to have St. Brown starting going up against Shaq Griffin. Griffin is very vulnerable. Worst rated corner on the team. The negative is St. Brown is not a trusted piece for Aaron Rodgers, so it's going to take a little something special for him to produce. He also didn't necessarily look the part in early games that I've seen him in this season as a, quote, as a real NFL starting wide receiver. So we'll see how that comes together. All right, let's jump over to the Domination station now that we've done a little bit of this research and start to figure out our exposures. Now, the way we start is the first thing we do is go to the MVP tab. This is how we're going to set our MVP exposure. Obviously, with the single game slate, the MVP is the most important player because you must have the highest scoring player on the slate in the MVP spot if you want to win the cash. All right, let's keep it simple. Quarterbacks tend to be the top MVPs, especially quarterbacks that spread the football around quite a bit. That is certainly the case with a Russell Wilson. And can be the case with Rodgers, although we've seen Rodgers focus in on Davante Adams at times, and, Adams can definitely outscore Rodgers in a particular game. So let's take a look, and I'm just going to start real quick, and I'm going to say this feels like a target the quarterbacks game, so I'm going to go 35% Rodgers. Let's go 35%, 30% Russell Wilson. I like Davante Adams here. I'm going to start at 10%, and Aaron Jones is the other player that I love. Makes sense because what we're doing is we're also looking at these projections, and we want to stick with players with high projections. Those are the ones that are most likely to, be the highest scoring player on the slate. That's why they're projected highly. So how much do we have? 15, we got to 40%, we got to 90%. You have to fill out 100% here. So I'm going to continue to look through these numbers and see if I want to, where I want to increase. I might go, all right, let's go this. Maybe we'll go that for now. So going to go 70% between the two quarterbacks. And Wilson, the Seahawks are run heavy, but it doesn't mean that Wilson can't produce. He is a running quarterback. He's been running more lately. Let's take a look at, I also like to look at recent game logs for these players. So if you look at the game logs, it does tell a tale. Rodgers underproducing the last few weeks, okay. But certainly has that 28, 30-point ceiling. Got Wilson putting up good numbers every single week on low volume. He had this one high volume game against the Chargers, right? But other than that, it's been 26, 17 attempts, 23. I believe this is a volume up 26. Look at these low target passing attempt numbers and low completion numbers. Look at that compared to Aaron Rodgers, who's much higher, 40, 30, 46, 50, 40, 44. This is what I want from a quarterback. I want these 40s and 50s. I don't want these 18s and 24s. You got to be incredibly efficient, but that also doesn't produce that low volume approach doesn't produce massively high scoring wide receivers, as we'll see with if you look at the wide receivers for Seattle, they top out at under 20 points because the volume is so low. They need to break one for a touchdown to put up a number, and that's what it's been. Big number, touchdown. Big number, even small number, touchdown. Needed to get a touchdown. Needed to get a touchdown. This is just a mediocre line. I mean, it's great when you score, but a little bit expensive for someone who does that. Let's take a look at some of these other wide receivers to see where their ceiling and floor is, to see if they're candidates. 16 points, it'll get you 10, 12. I think Scantling can have a big game, but not an MVP type game. Baldwin, same deal. Hasn't done anything this year. Same targets, needs to score a touchdown. I think he's got that same 17, 18 point upside, but I don't think that's going to outscore the quarterbacks. Now, we do see with the Davante Adams that he has smash games on occasion. 30 points, 25 points. So these are the games where he would have been the winning MVP. Maybe a game like this. And with Aaron Jones, just last week, 30 points. We see week after week that running backs, because they can rush for 2 touchdowns, get 100 yards, they can smash value quicker than wide receivers. If the wide receiver smashing value, usually their quarterback is doing it. But so running backs are much more likely to be the alternative captain as compared to wide receivers, which, you know what, I'm going to leave that, but I'm going to jack up Jones here to 20%. And then we're going to go, I don't know, I guess we'll take Aaron down to 30 for now. Okay, so now let me point out, the idea here is I'm going to make 150 lineups for the 25K Thursday Hail Mary. That's a quarter game. The reason I'm showing this one, every one of you watching this can afford to play in this. You max it out for $37.50. You're not going to lose all your entries, especially if you design a nice array of lineups which cover a lot of different bases. Some of them are going to cash unless you're really, really bad at this stuff. And, hey, unless you miss, like, for example, how does it not cash? If I don't choose the right guy. Let's say Rashad Penny goes off for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. You don't have him. You didn't use him. Well, then you're screwed. Somebody's going to have him as a captain. I'm not going to. St. Brown, Dixon, Kendricks. I'm looking at every player that has a possibility of doing anything. Like Jamal Williams might say, well, should I pull him out? Well, they could give him a goal line. He could fall into the end zone for a touchdown. Not somebody I'm excited about. I like St. Brown more than him, but he can get there. Vinette, sure. He got a bunch of targets recently. Jaron Brown, a guy who could accidentally score a touchdown. So let's see what happens if we just leave it as it is. I've got my MVP exposure set. 30, 35, 15, 20. That's what I'm doing for now. Not official. It's early in the day, but that's where I'm at right now. Let's run it. Boom. Okay, running 100 lineups, observing what the exposures look like. This is important. It's actually important to run it all the way through because you have to allow for all of the MVPs to hit to really get a sense of how exposures are going to go. And once we get the full 150, I'm going to be able to start looking through my exposure list of flex plays because we know what our MVP exposures are going to be. We set them. So we know exactly what they're going to be. There they are, exactly as we set. You on the Domination Station Optimizer, you control MVP exposure using min exposure settings. And you equal it out to 100% so you can set them up how you want. All right, so here's what we wound up with. Baldwin, the highest flex exposure at 59%. Now, we already took a look at Baldwin. He does have a good matchup here, but am I going to risk my entire slate on a guy who has produced these numbers? I don't want to risk the whole thing. I understand why he's popping. The salary is low, and his chances of exceeding value and being in the perfect lineup are solid. But that's a little bit too much for my taste. So I'm going to deal with that, right? We got Valdez-Scantling, also very inexpensive player, popping all over the place. I really like Scantling here. 41% seems about right to me. Got our kickers. Crosby, a little bit lower than Seabass. I don't see why that would be the case. Obviously, the Seahawks are favored, and we prefer kickers on teams that are favored. Carson, a little too much for me considering the number of players available. Another guy I'm seeing a little too much of, Jimmy Graham. Let's see what his salary is. 9K. Listen, Graham needs a touchdown to make value. There's a revenge narrative going on here. There's another guy. I mean, do I really want that much Mike Davis? If you'll note what I'm doing here, I'm lowering projections on players I don't like very much. Okay? When I want more exposure to someone, I'm going to just raise the projection a little bit. David Moore, not a guy I want this much exposure to either. Let's go 5. Aaron Jones, that's way too little for me. So I'm going to jack him up a bit. Let's run it again. This is the basics of how you put together your distribution to enter into these tournaments. I'm running 150. When I see numbers I don't like on certain players, I change them. I have too much Baldwin still. And then the next step is adding in stacks. We haven't even gotten to that yet. But yeah, Baldwin's still popping too much for my taste. Again, I like Baldwin here. There's a reason why the optimizer likes him. So we want exposure. I'm not quite wanting that much for a guy who just hasn't produced this season. We run it again. We run it again. Keep running it until we get here. Adams coming up. Now I'm seeing more Adams. More Adams is what I want, right? Adams is the top wide receiver on the slate. The only negative with having a lot of Adams in there is it's difficult to afford both him, Rodgers, and Russell Wilson. But that's fine. That will create unique lineups. I think Adams can outscore both quarterbacks, so I don't mind. I don't want to have more. Now, the quarterbacks have higher floors, but Adams is the best player on the slate. Him and Jones. All of it's interestingly, coming from the Seattle side. So I run it again. Again, Baldwin popping, Scantling popping like crazy. We want a little bit of high floor. I raised up the projection of Adams again here. I'm going to lower Jimmy Graham. So I'm just working these exposures to where I want them. Eventually what we'll do is jump over to, I want a little more St. Brown as well. He is underpriced, considering he's going to be out there all the time, and I prefer a player like him over some of these, sketchy options like Jamal Williams. Williams barely played last week. It was an 80-20 split for Jones. So Jones has emerged as a beast, and that's the guy I want more of this week. Where's Jones? Okay, he's still too low. I want him to be a primary piece that's popping like crazy. So that's the issue. The challenge this week is I like all 4 of these high-priced guys. And so you can't fit them all in. Look. These are the 4 that we want the most exposure to. The problem is if you look at the salaries, you can't have all 4. You can't really even have 3 of them together. You can barely have 2 of them together. Or if you have 3, then you really have to go with super punts. So it's going to be that's the reason we're mass multi-entering is this. Because sure, I can tell you who I think are going to be the best top scoring players. I told you the 4. But we can't squeeze them all together. So we have to figure out ways of getting the most of them into lineups and who fits with them. We've seen Seattle's vulnerability to the run. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to not get some Jones exposure in here. He's also been a fucking beast. You know, when you look at this, ask yourself, do I really want to stake my whole day on Doug Baldwin? Maybe. But probably not. If I see too much of something, I'm going to lower their projection down. Carson, he's splitting how many touches with how many people? Why is he even popping? I don't know. Again, Jimmy Graham, not the best matchup. I like the revenge narrative, but Seattle's been pretty good against tight ends. Jones still not showing as much as I want. I'm going to raise him up. Mike Davis? All right. Not my favorite play either. Don't know which of the Seattle running backs is going to be the best. Got to spread this exposure around. Lockett, crazy overpriced. He could score a touchdown, but is he going to outscore some of these other options in his range? I don't think so. So now we're starting to get better numbers, though. I'm going to run this one more time, and then I'm going to show you the process of entering these lineups onto FanDuel. This will not be my final. I'll continue to edit these, but since it's early, and I personally want to reserve my lineups, I'm ready to roll. But you've got a general breakdown of this slate, who's good, who to have more exposure to. We've had DFS Army VIP members literally win every fucking single game slate that has happened. This weekend we had a guy win the DraftKings one he took $22,000. We had two people tie in the FanDuel $9 one, each taking in $8,280 on a $9 bet. Those are all posted on our wall of wins and in the DFS Army Slack and all over social media. I won the showdowns on Thursday and Sunday night myself in the quarter and the dollar game. It's on my RotoGrind. It's on my rankings over there. You can take a look. So we've been winning these every time using the Dom Station. It's a lot of fun. You can make a lot of lineups. It's not super expensive. It's a quarter an entry. DraftKings has a 50-cent one. DraftKings, same idea, but more complexity because there are more candidates for captains. And I'll just run through DraftKings real quick. Wait, let me finish up here the process of setting these lineups onto my DraftKings account, my FanDuel account. Hang on. So we're going to download the lineups. Ready? Very simple. They're there. Going to jump over to DraftKings, upload from CSV, choose the file. Open it, upload. That's it. Enter 150. Now I'll do this in the dollar game, maybe the 3, maybe the 4, who knows. And these will be edited. These lineups are not a done deal. These will be edited. So let's jump over to DraftKings real quick. And I'm just going to go through some potential captains. Obviously, you have to pay up for the captain on DraftKings. I like to favor pass catchers, but there's an argument to be made for a few different possibilities here. So let's look at the salary level. Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, certainly in play. Love Devontae Adams as a captain if you could fit him. You know, if you're going to do Adams, you might as well pair him up with Rodgers. Not a whole lot of funds left. One of my favorite things about the DraftKings format is they really allow you to kind of fit some players into your lineups. And look where they have the Seattle running backs. Super cheap. Totally different from FanDuel. But in this case, you know, you get a kicker in there, you get one of the defenses, Seahawks defense in there. You've opened up some salary, maybe another kicker. And now I can put in Aaron Jones. I've got money left over. I could go from, one of these kickers. I can switch from a kicker to, let's see, David Moore. I think I like the kicker more. But You get the idea. I can do that. I can swap in Aaron Rodgers for Adams here. Probably still have enough funds to pay for it all. Yeah, there it is. So you could do that, double kicker and a defense. Now, I don't like using Seattle defense with Aaron Rodgers and all of those, so maybe Packers defense. How about Equanimous St. Brown? All right, so who are the captain candidates? Same group as before. I don't really see... I might add in like a Valdez-Scantling for the salary savings, but for the most part, I see Aaron Jones, Adams, Wilson, and Rodgers as potential captains on DraftKings this week. I like trying to mix in Scantling, Rodgers. There you go. You got a triple stack. Now we can go again and maybe throw in Seattle kicker, Crosby. I like using double kickers. And we can afford one more player. I'd try to get Adams in there. Can't quite afford him. Or Wilson. How do you get to Adams or Wilson? Let's see. Take out this kicker. Put in Adams. 900 left. Are there any super cheap plays here? Let's see. Vanette. Dixon. Playable. Not a good play, but playable. Put in St. Brown. Quanemios. See the issue. Valdez-Scantling. You almost have to take Rodgers out. Anyway, don't want to sit through working that out here, but you get the idea. Good luck tonight, everyone. I hope this video helped, at the very least, break down the slate and also give you an idea of how to use the Domination Station Optimizer from DFS Army to create 150 lineups really quick, attack these single game formats. We have the edge here. Get in there, play it, win it. You can take these down. Good luck, everyone.